So when we're watching what we eat to make sure everything is as clean as it can be, how do we protect ourselves from the chemicals, chemtrails that continue to spray on us? I mean, the best way is to filter your air and filter your water. You know, filter your air, filter your water. If you have the means, grow your own food. And control as much of your exposure to what I say the mass production of society. The mass production is where you run the greatest degrees of risk. And, you know, we see this trend, in my opinion, this super alarming trend of demonizing beef, demonizing cows, cow farts as being the cause of global warming and the cause of the death of the planet, which is absolutely, utterly, scientifically, completely ridiculous. And anyone who espouses that, I would love them to come on the show and debate me. They're morons. And we could, in 5 seconds, we could discredit them as being pseudoscientific ignoramuses. I mean, that's as kind as I'll put it. But that whole scenario of the way our food has been poisoned, the way we've been poisoned, the way we've been told to take poisons for health, right? I mean, that's what I meant earlier by down is up and up is down. Most people believe that poison, you know, drugs do not provide health. Behaviors are what shape and mold your body for the most part. How you behave, right? How you eat, sleep, drink, how you love, who you surround yourself with. I mean, there's numerous behaviors that if you control them well enough, your body will be adaptive, resilient, responsive, and healthy. But if you buy into, again, if you don't tell yourself the truth and you buy into the lie that you somehow, that your body's not good enough, that God didn't create you in his image and make you good enough to be able to navigate this world, that's the ultimate lie, right? That's the ultimate lie, is to convince the entire population that somehow we're not good enough, that God created us broken, and that we somehow need man's intervention to save us and to save our planet. Anyway, I don't want to get too political, because I know many of you may not see 100% eye to eye, and this is not the medium for that. How does or should my stool change when going gluten-free? It depends. So, you know, gluten for some people causes diarrhea. For others, it can cause constipation. And you know, I've seen it improve the stool form in both directions, right? And so that's what I would look to. That your stool changes in a way where it's more consistent, where it's well formed, where it's normal, where it's a dark brown color, where you don't have mucus or blood in it. Like, that's ultimately what you would want to see happen if you had those abnormalities. Let's see. I have gastrointestinal metaplasia and reversible precancerous condition due to chronic gut inflammation. My question, what digestive enzyme protocol would you recommend for GI metaplasia? Well, first, I'd want to know why the GI metaplasia existed. So those of you that don't know, metaplasia means cellular change. So it's like a precancerous type of lesion. And then a lot of times in the intestine, if we're talking about the gut, specifically folate deficiency and calcium deficiency have been directly linked to the creation or the contribution of metaplasia in those cell lines. So, I mean, the first thing that I think I would do is having my nutritional status measured and checked, but also have my reactivity to different foods and chemicals measured and checked, so that you can adjust your diet appropriately, so that you can deal with that. Now, as far as a digestive enzyme protocol, you can take digestive enzymes, but that's not going to solve this issue, right? You really got to go to the core of why that issue exists. Now, digestive enzyme will be supportive of your digestion, but again, it won't solve that issue. My buddy went vegan, lost a ton of weight, but also became depressed, was given an SSRI. He was fine prior to that. I tried to explain it. Could be his diet, but he won't listen. How can I get through to him? You know, I wish you could. I mean, ultimately, this is where, how do you get through to somebody who you love and care about who doesn't want to listen? Like, because we're all dealing with that, right? I mean, no matter what you believe, if you believe in, you know, in COVID-19, if you believe in getting a shot or not getting a shot, right? It doesn't matter which side of that you're on. Ultimately, whatever you believe is what you believe, and trying to convince somebody else who's not willing to hear you and not willing to be convinced, in my opinion, is a waste of time. Remember that love is truth, And your truth starts right here by looking in the mirror and making your changes. So the only way you're going to do any convincing to anyone is you have to be the beacon. You have to be the shining light. You have to be the example, right, of the antithesis to what that person you care about is doing, so that when they're ready in their mind to accept the fact that they need help, or that they can challenge what they're currently doing in their own mind, they may or may not come to you. By the way, they may come to you. If they do come to you, you'll have the opportunity to lead them in the right direction. But you can't take somebody who's unwilling to change and unwilling to even acknowledge that the change is necessary. You can't take that person and convince them. You're not going to. You can only be a beacon of light so that when they're ready, when their minds are ready and their hearts are ready to receive information and knowledge and make a change, that you're there for them, and you can, at that point, you can then begin to influence them. That's really, unfortunately, the only way you're going to bring change to anyone. Remember, there's a fundamental rule, it's a psychological law, if you will, and that is simply this: a person has their level of pain, no matter what the pain is, whether it's the pain of depression or the pain of physical joint pain or the pain of an illness that they struggle with that makes their life miserable, whatever the pain is, right? A person's level of pain has to far outweigh their fear of change. You know, people fear change, fearing change, right? They fear change, and that's why they won't answer themselves honestly. They won't even question what they're currently doing, because the fear of change is very tremendous. And this is why the fear of a life of, really, if we really boil it down, it's the fear of, it's not the fear, it's when people get ready for this change, it's because they are in mourning. They're mourning their life's potential. They're mourning, psychologically, they're mourning the death of themselves. They're mourning the death of what they are capable of bringing into the world. So they're mourning the loss of their own light, of their own internal light. And they're living but mourning at the same time. And that's what creates the depression. But again, this has to become greater than their fear of change for them to be able to open their ears to hear your message and to hear your word. If they're not at that place, there's no amount of convincing that you're going to do. And so that's, you know, I say that because, look, I deal with it too all the time. I mean, you know, you guys tune in and you've been watching me, some of you for years, some of you are new to the show. But look, I have direct blood family relatives that don't listen. You know, and I can't convince them, and it's not my job to try to convince them. I love them, and I honor their ability to have free will, and I love them and respect them to the level that I respect the decisions that they want to make to lead their life and be in their own body. I just don't own their decisions, right? And that's where a lot of family, it's where it gets tough with family and personal friends that you love, is that a lot of times you want to step in and be a hero. People want to step in and be a hero, but the only person that's going to be anyone's hero is God and themselves, right? And they have to have that conversation in their heart to be able to step forward to make that change. And if they're not willing to do that, you can be supportive, but your role in supporting them is going to be to support them in making the same decisions that they're already making. Because if you try to convince them of doing something different and they don't see eye to eye with you, you're going to ruin the relationship. You're going to destroy the potential future chance to help that individual, because you're going to create such a dissension within the relationship that they no longer want to talk to you. And that's just God's honest truth. Let's see here. I heard that B vitamins are cultured on yeast. 1, is that true? How is your B complex cultured? And 3, if you have yeast candida overgrowth, do B complexes contribute to this problem? So a lot to unpack there. Some are cultured on yeast and some are not. Remember that a lot of the natural B vitamins we get from different types of microorganisms, whether they be bacteria or yeast. That doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, meaning if something's cultured from yeast, it doesn't necessarily make it bad. It's still a bioavailable form of the nutrient. Let's see, where'd the rest of that question go, because it was multi-part. And if you have yeast candida overgrowth, do B complexes contribute to the problem? Not generally, no. Generally, no. Where we see B complexes contribute to the person's problem as it relates to yeast overgrowth is generally as if they're living in mold. If there's a environmental mold issue that they're struggling with, and so when you're in environmental mold, what happens is you can't get rid of candida because the mold externally produces mycotoxins that suppress your immune system. And so if you've got, and all of us do, we have some degree of yeast growing in us. It's called our mycobiome. Then what happens is that microbiome gets out of control and it overgrows. And when you take B vitamins, especially the methylated versions of B vitamins, what you do is you amp up detoxification pathways. And so that mobilizes mycotoxins and it creates more of a detoxification reaction, but it doesn't necessarily make a yeast overgrowth worse. How do we get back our sense of taste and smell after recovering from a cold or flu? I mean, hands down, in my experience, there's 3 things you can do. Number 1 is zinc. And anywhere between, I've seen anywhere between 25 and 100 milligrams of zinc be effective at doing that. Number 2 is quercetin, because quercetin drives the zinc into the cells. So combining zinc and quercetin is a good thing. Remember, your taste and smell are dependent upon zinc. Zinc drives that process. And then number 3 is retrain your smell. And one of the best ways to retrain your smell is to smell different things. So a lot of people, we find that's beneficial for them is using different essential oils. So for example, eucalyptus and peppermint, and just going through different oils and doing deep breathing, smelling activity where you're trying to basically retrain and reactivate your olfactory receptors. So those are the 3 things that I would recommend that you try to do. I've had people write me and say that within days of using quercetin, their smell came back. I don't see that for everyone. So I don't want to tell everybody here listening that that's the catch-all and the ultimate cure, if you will, for everyone's loss of smell. But I've had a number of people write me saying, using our Ultra Q, that their smell returned rather quickly. So those are my experiences. What's the best meal to break a 3-day fast? Best meal, liquid meal, something kind of either liquid or pureed. So again, making it easy for your gut to bring food back in without just shocking it back into a major food fest. Will my wife be angry at us tonight for talking to us tonight instead of taking her out to dinner? No, because we don't go out to eat. I mean, like, we eat at home. I mean, I practice what I preach, right? So no, but she will appreciate me not going too long tonight. So thanks for the reminder. I took a DNA genome test. It shows the genetic basis, gluten sensitivities, risk genes, HLA-DQ1, 238, but no risk for HLA-DRBs and risk for fairness, globulins, purines. What are these last 3? Those are different forms of proteins found in grain that people can react to. But if you took that test where they were measuring those proteins, I can just tell you that test methodology is not very accurate. My experience, and I won't say the name of the lab, but I know the lab you used, not a great lab in that regard. So been taking Histassist for allergies. It helps a lot, but started nosebleeds every a few weeks for a few months now. Wondering if any supplements can cause blood thinning or something else. The biggest, in my experience, the biggest supplements that can cause nosebleeding, not so much the stuff in Histassist, but like vitamin E, high doses of vitamin E, high doses of ginkgo, high doses of omega-3 fatty acids have all been shown to thin the blood, and for some can cause spontaneous nosebleeding, intermittent spontaneous nosebleeding. Can shoulder pain be as a result of trauma, left abusive relationship 3 months ago and going through divorce? It can be. People will store their emotional pain in their joints, and so it certainly is a possibility. This is why sometimes like massage and chiropractic and other forms of physical modality care can be such great relievers people tend to hold their stress within their shoulders, and so those types of physical therapies can be very, very relieving in that regard. Why is it harder for PCOS patients to lose weight? Because PCOS is a form of diabetes, and nobody's told you that probably, and so you didn't know it, and so you're probably approaching your weight loss all wrong because you're probably over-consuming carbs as a general rule of thumb. That's just a generalization. Can gluten intolerance cause dysautonomia? Yes, it sure can. Let's see here. When they get bad enough, they will listen. In the meantime, just love them. Yeah, that's true. I think that's just a reiteration of what I said earlier. I think that's a big important part too, though, to that equation, what we're talking about. And maybe a good way to wrap tonight up is just to say, look, if you love somebody who's struggling right now, and they're not open in their hearts to listen, and they're not open in their hearts yet to change, just remember this: it's not your burden. It's not your burden to carry. Their detriment, their poor health is not your burden to carry. It's not your fault. You can't blame yourself for not convincing them better, right? A lot of people find themselves in this kind of framework, again, of guilt for not being able to help that individual. Remember, this is why I go, again, not to be too political, but kind of this is why I hate communism. Because communism falls under the premise that it's everybody's job to take care of everybody, and then it's nobody's job to take care of themselves, right? Is that the whole will take care of the individual, but the individual has no self-serving responsibility to do their own self-love and to take care of themselves. And so everybody in that model, everybody just thinks everybody else is going to do the work so they can sit back and coast on everyone else's shoulders, and it never works. It just doesn't work that way. You have to take ownership of what is yours, right? Give to God what is God's. Give to yourself what belongs to you, which is your own choices, your own freedom of the ability to make your own decisions. But respect others enough that they have that same capacity and that same ability, and that you can't take ownership of their choices, because if you try to, it will eat you alive. The stress will eat you alive, and it will destroy your health in the process. So, all that being said, I know we got more questions, but it is 15 after and it is Valentine's. So forgive me for wrapping it up and going home to spend some time with my wife and my family. And just want to say I love you all, and thank you for spending part of your Valentine's evening with me. I'll see you back here next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.